Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Carson Scott. Coming up, just when the push to establish a national e-conveyancing system seemed it was gaining momentum, well, think again. It seems it's hit another roadblock. We're going to find out who's throwing a spanner in the works very shortly. First, though, in the wake of the UK government allowing foreign investment in its law firms since the start of this year, all in the name of stimulating innovation, incidentally, it seems Australia's on the back foot in following suit. We might have been, indeed, the first country in the world to allow external investment in firms, but it's been a slow grind when it comes to gaining traction. Question being, just why? Well, joining me now, Warren Riddell, partner at Beaton Capital. Warm welcome to you. There is the big question mark. First off, let's just understand why we led the charge and then things didn't indeed take off.
That's a very good question, Carson. In 2001, Australian legislation introduced the Incorporated Legal Practices Act to allow that very reform of the industry. All we've seen in the last 10 years is two firms, Slater and Gordon, going public, and Integrated Legal Holdings. There have been many hundreds of law firms that have actually incorporated, but what we haven't seen in Australia in the last few years really is what we've seen in the UK actually in the last 12 months, and particularly in the last 6 months.
Is that coming down to the government taking hold of this issue and saying, in a big picture way, it's time to reform, and putting that out as a public discussion rather than it just being done behind the scenes here relatively?
There's an element of that, but I think also there's an element of actually just understanding the asset class. So what we see in the UK now is that external investors. The crux of this is the fact that we're now seeing external investors actually investing in aspects of legal services and buying law firms in different areas.
So seeing that there's value that's kind of languished until now, and realising that there's hay to be made.
There's locked up value in many of these organisations in the UK, and what the PE firms, and there aren't many of them, I have to say. There's only been 3 or 4 PE firms, and they're the mid-tier PE firms. But what PE firms are very good at, of course, is actually looking at growth potential. They're looking at cost control, and actually looking at customer experience and client experience.
That's the thing. Are we sufficiently far down the road to see what's come out the other end of that whole transaction? So PE takes it on, it shakes it up, and then it flicks it on once again. Has that happened in the UK?
Well, there's been no flicking on yet. It's still early days. But what we are seeing in the UK, for example, if you look at an organisation like the Quality Solicitors, which is a high street chain in the UK, they received PE money last year. They've now, through the PE involvement, they've tied up with WH Smiths, which has some 1,000 stores in the UK. They're gradually rolling out their shop front within WH Smiths. Smiths have actually said that almost 3/4 of the UK population pass through their stores every year. So an enterprising law firm has seen this opportunity to get in front of that population.
What's that going to mean for the mid-tier players, and by extension, what could threaten their whole business model here into the future? The likes that sort of peddle in property, insurance, you know, the staples of those mid-tier enterprises. Are they under threat?
I think they are. What we're seeing in the UK is not just the high commodity areas of law, such as conveyancing, for example, being aggregated. What we're also seeing is some very interesting innovations. So, for example, Kent County Council have teamed up with a local law firm and actually now looking to provide, through the ABS structure that the UK have introduced, provide specialist public sector law, which is actually starting to undermine the mid-tier law firms in the UK. So in areas of, let's say, banking, not finance, but banking, where you have maybe mortgage processing, where you have insurance claims, where you have other aspects of property. And those 3 areas are often the staple diet of mid-tier firms in Australia. What if we then take what we're seeing in the UK and apply it to Australia? Well, those areas actually could well be under threat in Australia. So mid-tier firms that actually maybe 20–30% of their business is made up from commoditised services in the area, well, they could find that actually on the diet of a PE firm that wants to aggregate.
Are you predicting that is going to indeed trigger a wave of M&A simply in order to kind of strengthen and buttress themselves as a collective against the perceived threat, the perceived threat of PE coming in?
I don't think we'll see M&A. I think what we might see, what we term in our business, we see it disaggregation without disintermediation.
Gosh, that is a mouthful by anyone's reckoning. Strip the jargon away. What are you actually getting at?
Well, what you will see, I think, is some smart law firms recognising actually we can spin this out, we can attract some external investment, we can still own a part of that, but we actually get the best of what, say, a good mid-tier PE firm could bring about in terms of new management techniques and IT, maybe aggregate some other practices around that and actually have that as something we own.
You raised there earlier just the benign example of the high street station at WH Smith and then services that are augmenting that for the public. But when it's aligned to a bank and with all the bad bank press that's out there, how concerning is that for the legal fraternity, which until now might have prided itself on being one step removed from all the negative Mark of Cain stuff on banks? If suddenly you're tying yourself to one, is that not double-edged?
Well, there are going to be conflict issues, and this is obviously one of the areas that the detractors from what the ABS program in the UK is trying to achieve, the fact that there's conflicts of interest that can't be controlled. But what we're seeing, I think, are early smart movers in the legal profession, recognising that that firm has a very strong brand. WH Smith, for example, is a strong brand. Detractors also use terms like Tesco law as a means of sort of playing down and almost frightening the marketplace in terms of the service quality that might come from this. But actually all it will take is a good quality brand teaming with another good quality brand. So one of the four banks teaming with maybe a very strong legal brand, providing a combined solution.
How does this sort of raise the bar of expectations with the regulatory authorities and their capacity, their resourcefulness to be monitoring these changes? Have we seen as rapid a move to sort of really put the resources their way?
Well, in the UK, if you use that as a model again, the Solicitors Regulatory Authority is regulating the granting of licences for the ABS system. And it hasn't gone... There's only been 7 licences issued this year so far. There's probably another dozen or so that are actually waiting in the wings.
And once the licence is granted, what's their role beyond that?
There's ongoing monitoring. So ultimately, and Slater and Gordon had the same issue here when they floated, ultimately law firms are accountable to the courts. Which is a significant difference between a board of directors being accountable to its shareholders and to the other regulatory authorities. So first and foremost, if you look at the constitution of Slater and Gordon, it's very clearly pointed to the courts first. So that will never change. And so that always has to be understood by investors, whether they're PE investors or whether they're private investors or even public investors.